Good evening and blessings to all. Every person in life encounters moments of stubbornness. The question arises, should I remain firm or show flexibility? King Solomon offers guidance both in a parable and its explanation about the harm and benefits of these different approaches. Let's first explore the parable he presents and then delve into its meaning. In Proverbs 11:20, King Solomon says, "The Lord detests those with a perverse heart, but he delights in those whose ways are blameless." A person with a perverse heart, Solomon explains, is distanced by God. The word detests implies something uncomfortable, something unpleasant that we naturally push away. God distances himself from those with a stubborn heart. Why does Solomon tie stubbornness to the heart? He uses this term because sometimes the mind understands the need for flexibility, but the emotions in the heart, ego and pride, refuse to allow it. This type of stubbornness can manifest in various areas of life and often leads to self-destruction. For example, imagine a man who feels slighted by his father-in-law on Tuesday. By Saturday, when he and his wife were supposed to visit her parents, he declares, "We're not going, we're staying home." His wife, who has already made plans and feels committed, is upset, especially with the last-minute change. Deep down, the man knows he's making a mistake. Yet having spoken those words, his pride stops him from retreating. He insists on his decision, causing unnecessary conflict and disappointing his wife. Solomon teaches us that this kind of stubbornness stems not from logic but from the heart. It's destructive. As we know, the human soul is structured with three elements. The nefesh, soul, seated in the liver, governs desires. The ruach, spirit, seated in the heart, governs emotions. The neshamah, higher soul, seated in the brain, governs rational thought and intellect. Sometimes these forces conflict. The heart, driven by emotions like ego and pride, pulls a person one way, while the intellect suggests another. The person worries, "If I admit I was wrong, what does that say about my word? About my integrity?" This irrational thinking traps them. But consider the consequences of such stubbornness. How much pain are you causing your wife? How many uncomfortable situations are you creating for yourself? This applies not only to marriage but also to business. A boss might make a decision and a junior employee suggests it's a mistake, offering an alternative plan. The boss knows the employee is right, but pride prevents him from admitting it. Instead, he clings to his original decision, resulting in significant financial losses. Flexibility is crucial. Life demands the ability to adapt and course correct. It's okay to admit, "I made a mistake." Apologize, reevaluate, and choose a better path. A flexible person is more loved and respected by those around them. The sages highlight a general distinction between men and women in this area. Men tend to be more stubborn, while women are often more flexible. This is rooted in a unique wisdom the sages call bina, yeteira, an additional sense of understanding, which is attributed to women. This idea is reflected in Jewish law. Girls take on the responsibilities of mitzvot, commandments, at age 12, while boys only do so at 13. Why? Because girls mature earlier and possess a deeper intuitive grasp of responsibility and insight. In conclusion, let us strive for flexibility in life. Put ego aside, consider the bigger picture, and seek the best outcome for everyone involved. By doing so, we build stronger relationships, make wiser decisions, and bring greater harmony to our lives. A 12-year-old boy is still a child. The Holy One, blessed be He, says, I don't yet trust your judgment or your responsibility for life. Mature a bit more, reach the age of 13, and only then will you be obligated in mitzvot, commandments. However, when it comes to a 12-year-old girl, the Holy One says, I trust you. You are already mature. The Talmud explains why, because bina yeteira, extra insight, was given to women. Women possess an attention to detail that men often lack, even at an older age. The Talmud teaches that wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, chokhmah, bina, and da'at, each have distinct qualities. Chokhmah, wisdom, is data. Gathering information makes a person wise and knowledgeable, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are insightful. Bina, understanding, is the ability to analyze details, connect the dots, and create new ideas with broader vision. Da'at, knowledge, is reaching a conclusion when a person truly knows and internalizes something as a fact. In prayer, we say, grant us from you wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. First, we ask to be wise, then to use that wisdom effectively by focusing on details and building ideas, and finally to reach accurate conclusions. This is the essence of the request for wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Regarding women, the sages say, bina yeteira was given to them. This is why the Talmud, Berachot, advises, when faced with a significant decision, whether in business, buying a home, or any other matter, consult your wife. The Talmud recounts that when Rabbi Eliezer was offered the presidency of Israel, equivalent to the highest leadership position at the time, everyone assumed he would immediately accept. After all, who wouldn't want such an honorable role? Yet he replied, let me consult my wife first. Perhaps there's something I haven't considered, or maybe she'll see a detail I missed. After consulting his wife, she raised two potential issues. He investigated and resolved them, and only then accepted the position. Imagine such a scenario today. A member of parliament is offered the presidency, and he says, hold on, I need to call my wife to see if she approves. It may seem unusual, but the sages understood. Bina yeteira enables women to perceive details and nuances men might overlook. This insight extends beyond practical matters to understanding people's character. The sages also teach that a woman has a natural intuition to recognize people's true nature. For example, if you're unsure about someone's honesty in business dealings, invite them to your home for a meal. Then, ask your wife afterward for her impression. She can assess a person's character with a single interaction, something you might not grasp even after 10 business meetings. This same intuition applies to relationships. If a young man is considering marrying a particular woman and his mother advises against it, saying, she's not right for you, pay attention. If her reasoning is superficial, like saying, you're better looking than she is, you can dismiss it. But if she points out issues in the woman's character or behavior, her intuition likely holds weight. Similarly, if a mother advises her daughter against a particular match, noting flaws in the man's behavior, it's worth heeding her advice. Especially in relationships without adherence to shmirat negia, avoiding physical contact before marriage. It's difficult to see the other person's shortcomings objectively. Physical touch clouds judgment, as the Torah states. Bribery blinds the eyes of the wise. Mothers are often gifted with this sense of bina yeteira to evaluate situations and people. This heightened insight allows them to observe details that others might miss. On a broader scale, the heart, the seat of emotion, often conflicts with the intellect. King Solomon warns against stubbornness born of emotion rather than logic. He says that when stubbornness stems from the heart, ignoring the mind's reasoning, it becomes a behavior the Holy One detests. God distances himself from those who let emotion override reason. However, if one's intellect determines that persistence is necessary, such as adhering to moral values or resisting peer pressure, then this kind of firmness is virtuous. Ultimately, the lesson is clear. Let reason guide you. There is a time for flexibility and a time to stand firm, but only when the intellect, rather than emotion, leads the way. The kid that has friends who lead him to bad places, he says to them, I don't want to come. I don't identify with the place you're going to, traveling abroad, but he knows that the trials he will face there, the places they will visit, will lower him spiritually. Yet, they pressure him. He needs to be firm, he needs to be flexible, but also determined. Here, it's his intellect guiding him. It's not stubbornness of the heart. It's something his mind tells him. This is not for you, don't go there. That others are going, that's their problem. How many have truly gone on trips abroad and returned with scars? There's also a phenomenon that needs to be eradicated, a misguided perception that it's a Torah obligation for soldiers to take a post-army trip abroad. Where in the Torah is it written that you need a trip after the army? A person must know what's right for them, what's good for them, what's missing in the land of Israel. All the landscapes you'll find abroad exist in the land of Israel. In the United States, you can travel for days, even weeks, and see the same scenery, either desert, jungle, forests, or water. In the land of Israel, you have all the landscapes you want. If you want snow, travel north to Mount Hermon, where you can ski. If you want a desert, head south. There are deserts and even different types of deserts, offering great variety. There are forests, waterfalls, everything you want. There's no need for this craze of leaving the country. Many also fail spiritually during these trips and return with scars. Some left mentally healthy and returned after smoking certain substances abroad, experiencing terrible hallucinations. They came back to Israel only to be hospitalized for years in psychiatric hospitals. Why? Because there they allowed themselves to do things they wouldn't permit themselves in Israel. They feel as if there's a reason to let loose. In such a situation, a person must be resolute. I'm not going with you. I won't join you in these places. The same applies to other life situations. Sometimes young people form friendships, and she meets someone for marriage. She wants to maintain boundaries, shmirat negia, but he suddenly doesn't want to. She needs to stand firm. I'm protecting myself. I don't want anyone to touch me. By the way, here's good advice for singles who know they struggle with maintaining boundaries before marriage. Commit never to meet alone in closed places. Always meet where there are other people. And when parting ways, don't let him say, "I'll give you a ride home." Let her respond, "I know how to take the bus by myself. I don't need you to drive me." This helps maintain proper boundaries and avoid situations that could lead to falling into sin or discomfort. In such situations, one must be firm, and this is a good form of determination. The stubbornness Solomon referred to in Proverbs, "The Lord detests a stubborn heart," is when the intellect understands the need for flexibility, but the emotions lead a person into unhealthy situations. What about parenting? Should one be firm or should one be flexible? What's the approach to raising children? If you've said something, can you later go back on it? This is a significant dilemma for parents. On one hand, they feel that if they say something and then go back on their word, it's not just about ego. It will harm the child's education. The child will feel the parent is fickle, changing their stance based on their mood. On the other hand, there are times when a parent realizes they made a mistake by saying no, and now sees they should agree. What should be done in such a case? In a book on parenting, we discussed this topic extensively. To summarize briefly, one of the great educators of the previous generation, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, wrote in his book, Foundations of Education, that when a child requests something and parents are debating whether to allow it or not, his advice is, give your child and allow them everything you can give and permit, on the condition that it does not harm their physical, moral, or spiritual well-being. In other words, if a child asks for something, the default approach should be, yes, why not? If it makes you happy, I'll give it to you. But before saying yes, Rabbi Hirsch advises asking yourself, if I agree to the child's request, could it potentially harm their physical health? Imagine a 14 or 15-year-old who wants to go on a trip with friends to dangerous places, and the parents know there's a lack of responsibility there. No one to properly supervise. The answer is no. But all my friends' parents allow it, and you're the only ones who don't. That's fine. Your friends' parents can do what they think is right. In our home, we have rules and values. We love you, and that's why we're saying no. Why? Because it's dangerous. What's dangerous? Trust me. We do trust you, but in this case, we're not comfortable. It's important to talk calmly, not angrily. Explain the reasoning without getting into drawn-out arguments. Give a short explanation, and then stand firmly by the decision. At the same time, it's always good to offer a compromise or alternative. For example, we'll give you the money you would have spent on the trip, and you can buy something you need, but not for the trip. Or, we'll go together as a family next week during the holiday break to that same place. Offer compensation, but remain steadfast in your decision, because the situation could harm your child's physical or moral well-being. If the situation could harm your child's character, values, or integrity, the answer is also no. For example, if they want to do something that goes against your family's core principles, the response should remain consistent: no. Parents might fear that saying no will drive their child away. But as Rabbi Hirsch explains, if a child is used to parents who act with care and give generously when possible, then when they say no for a valid reason, the child, though they may disagree, won't feel alienated. The child knows their parents would move heaven and earth for them. If they refuse, it's because they believe it's for the right reasons. Even if the child thinks they're being overly strict, they recognize there's a valid foundation for the refusal. This doesn't create a rift between parents and children. Rabbi Hirsch adds, never forbid something you could permit. If there's no real issue with the request, don't deny it out of laziness. For instance, a young child asks their father, who's reading the newspaper, to get a toy down from the shelf. The father doesn't feel like getting up and brushes the child off. The child walks away disappointed. That's a mistake. In one moment, the father could have made the child happy. Why refuse when you can easily say yes? Rabbi Hirsch emphasizes that refusals should be reserved for situations where they're truly necessary. If parents say no too often, the child gets used to constant refusals. How many times can they hear no before they rebel? By the time parents face a situation where they must say no, the child is already frustrated and resistant, leading to conflict and tension, especially during adolescence. A wise parent knows how to guide their child to behave in the way they want, while allowing the child to feel they've made the choice themselves. You can steer them in the right direction, help them think critically, and encourage them to reach the right conclusion. When there's a strong bond between parents and children, this kind of cooperation is possible. Finally, stubbornness in parenting is a nuanced matter. When should you insist? When shouldn't you? Rabbi Hirsch cautions that once you've said no, don't back down just because the child throws a tantrum. For instance, even at a young age, a 3 or 5-year-old at the store notices candy at the checkout counter. The parent thought they'd hidden it, but the child spots it and insists. If you give him one candy, fine. The mother makes a judgment call. One candy won't hurt, and gives it to him. Now he wants another. Again, she thinks it over and decides it's okay and gives him another. Then he asks for another one. At this point, the mother says no. It's not healthy, it damages your teeth, that's enough. 2 candies and that's it. But the child really wants another one and starts acting out, screaming in the store, crying, throwing himself on the floor, embarrassing her in public. And if he's particularly clever, he might even take off his shoes and socks and wave his arms and legs around, making a scene. He wants that candy. Now imagine the mother is a 3rd-grade teacher and the school principal happens to be walking toward the checkout. She feels the pressure and thinks, fine, I'll give him the candy, just to keep him quiet and stop this embarrassment. This, says Rabbi Hirsch, is a mistake. He doesn't use this exact example, but the principle is clear. It's not the candy that's at stake here. It's the child's future education. If the child learns that when his mother says no because something isn't healthy, he can get it by throwing a tantrum and embarrassing her, then today it's a candy at age 3 or 5. At age 7 it'll be a bicycle, and at age 15, where will it lead? And by age 20? That's why, from the outset, Rabbi Hirsch advises, if you've said no, stand firm in your refusal. Even if it's embarrassing, you can smile and reassure those around you. Everything is under control. Everything is fine. The first time, he'll cry. The second time, he'll cry. the third time, maybe less. By the fourth or fifth time, he'll learn that when mom says no, it's not up for debate. He'll understand that her word is final. Now, what happens if the parents themselves feel unsure? Sometimes the father might say no to something, like allowing the child to go to a particular place, but the mother thinks it's perfectly fine. She might feel that the father lacks all the details, and that's why he's objecting. In such cases, it's crucial not to argue in front of the children. If the father says no, and the mother says yes, it undermines parental authority. A parental argument in front of the child, even about unrelated matters, is unwise. But if it concerns the child directly, the child learns how to play one parent against the other in the future. This parent is against me, and this one is on my side. This is a serious mistake. If the mother believes the father is wrong, she should call him aside and calmly explain her reasoning, providing him with additional details. Then, the father can come back to the child and say, "I initially said no because I thought XYZ, but mom explained her perspective, so now I agree." This shows flexibility and also preserves mutual respect. The father provides a reason for his change of mind, and the child learns that it's okay to be flexible while understanding the thought process behind decisions. Everything should be approached with wisdom, understanding, balance, and thoughtful consideration. This builds a child with a healthy mind. A child with a healthy mind grows up balanced and resilient, which is a gift for life. Such children grow up with self-confidence, happiness, and the ability to coexist peacefully with others. They don't dominate or control others, but allow space for everyone around them. The key to this lies in the parents' approach, how they guide and direct their child with a balanced and healthy perspective. Parents who grew up in households with a positive role model have an advantage because they've seen firsthand how to foster mutual respect. They've witnessed how a father respects the mother and vice versa. But for those who didn't grow up in such an environment, where perhaps there were arguments, conflicts, or even divorce, it becomes a conscious effort to learn and improve. Such parents must commit to growth and learning. Before marriage, it's essential to invest in personal development, work on character traits, and study how to understand your spouse's emotional needs. A man must learn to understand the emotional makeup of a woman and how to care for her unique needs. A woman must understand how a man is wired. Overcoming anger, practicing self-restraint, and fostering mutual respect are lifelong projects that lead to personal and spiritual growth. If you're looking for a role model to learn from, take Maimonides, the Rambam, as an example. When I was a young student in yeshiva, Maimonides was always the figure I looked up to. Although we never met him and never saw him, through his writings and letters, you can learn about his character and his completeness as a person. In Hilhot Deot, the laws of ethics, Maimonides explains how to live a balanced life, balanced in pleasures, balanced in character traits. His letters reveal his personality and provide lessons on how to emulate him. The verse says, "Your eyes shall behold your teachers." What's the significance of seeing your teachers, rabbis, scholars, and the righteous of the generations? By seeing, you learn behavior. It's not just theory. Today we don't have Maimonides or the great leaders of past generations, but we do have their books. Through them, we can learn how they lived and acted, and apply those lessons to our own lives. Returning to the verse, "An abomination to the Lord is one who is stubborn in heart." We explained that not all stubbornness is negative. There is a kind of stubbornness that is good. The Jewish people, by their nature, are a stubborn nation. If not for this trait, they wouldn't have survived history. When nations rose against us with inquisitions, massacres, and pogroms, demanding that we abandon the Torah and convert to their religions, Jews chose to jump into the fire to keep the commandments of the Torah and resist assimilation. This is a healthy and good form of stubbornness, the kind that has preserved the Jewish people. But when stubbornness manifests in bad character traits, that's what the verse calls an abomination to God. This verse can be understood both metaphorically and literally. The metaphor speaks of human interactions. being stubborn and unyielding in one's relationships with others, but the literal interpretation, as explained by the Vilna Gaon and others, refers to one's relationship with God. It describes someone who sins, knows it's wrong, but refuses to repent. For example, someone who desecrates Shabbat knows intellectually that is forbidden, as God commanded in the Torah, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, but they continue to desecrate it. Or someone who struggles with anger knows that God disapproves of anger, as the Talmud says, whoever gets angry is as if they worship idols. They understand this rationally but remain stubborn in their behavior. God calls out, "Return, wayward children, I will heal your waywardness." When a person sins, it's like a stain, a scar on the soul. God says, "I will heal it, just return to me." But when someone stubbornly resists change, despite knowing better, that stubbornness becomes an abomination. On the other hand, Solomon writes in the same verse, "But those who are wholehearted in their ways are his delight." What does it mean to be wholehearted? Tamim. In biblical language, it means complete, whole, and upright, not naive or easily fooled, as the modern connotation might suggest. For example, Jacob is described as a man of integrity, dwelling in tents. A tamim is someone balanced and complete in their character. God delights in those who walk wholeheartedly on the right path. They know how to recognize when they've strayed, correct themselves, and return to the right path. Imagine someone heading to Haifa who realizes they've mistakenly taken the road to Beersheba. What does the GPS say? Recalculating route. You turn around and get back on track. But what if someone says, "I have principles. If I started on this road, I'll stick to it"? Where will that lead them? They needed to reach Haifa for an important meeting, but instead they end up in Beersheba. What good will that do them? That's the lesson Solomon teaches us. Life requires flexibility. When you know you're on the wrong path, don't stubbornly stay there. Adjust, correct, and move forward toward the right destination. A person who is favored by God is someone who seeks completeness. If they make a mistake, they redirect themselves and align with the correct path. The Malbim writes an interesting insight about this verse. He explains that there are two extremes and a middle path. To detest something, toeva, is to reject it entirely, while to desire something, ratzon, is to embrace it strongly, but there is also a balanced state in between, a middle way. The verse captures both extremes, but acknowledges this middle path. Someone who is neither stubborn of heart nor perfect in their ways. This middle state refers to a person who is not entirely stubborn, but also not completely whole. They are balanced. While their heart doesn't oppose the laws of wisdom, and both their heart and mind recognize the correct path, they may still stray from the good path at times when their inclinations overpower them. This individual is not entirely desirable to God, but they are not detestable either. They are in the process of striving for the right direction, standing in the midst of the battle. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. Many can relate to this state, where a person acknowledges that they are not yet perfect and not always walking the ideal path. But as long as they aspire and make efforts to return to the right direction, they are on the right track. For example, a person struggling with observing the boundaries of physical contact may have moments of failure, but they consistently strive to return to the proper path. They refuse to give in. This is the essence of the verse. The righteous falls 7 times and rises. Rabbi Yitzhak Hutner, in his famous letter, poses a question. Why is someone who falls so many times still called righteous, tzaddik? 7 times, a symbolic number of abundance, implies repeated failure. Shouldn't the verse simply say a person falls and rises? Why call them righteous? Rabbi Hutner answers sharply, saying that fools think the verse means that even if a righteous person falls, they still rise. That seems to be the simple meaning, but it's not the truth. The wise understand that the verse means the rising of the righteous is achieved through their falls. This is why they are called righteous, because they do not settle for their failures. Each fall prompts them to reflect, why did I fall? Where did I fail to guard myself? How can I be more cautious next time? Thus, their falls ultimately build them into better individuals. We don't seek out failures, but if they happen, we must not panic. Instead, we should tell ourselves, the rising of the righteous is achieved through their falls. Each fall teaches them more. To illustrate, though Rabbi Hutner doesn't use this analogy, consider the example of a child learning to walk. We've all been children, crawling on all fours. One day, a child stands up and begins to take their first steps, but they don't instantly master walking. They take a few steps, their legs collide, and they fall. Sometimes they get hurt, cry, and are comforted, but they get up and try again. Parents stand a few meters away, encouraging them, "Come closer." The child falls again, gets up, and tries repeatedly until they learn to walk. Now, imagine if a child fell, got up, fell again, and eventually sat down, looking at their mother as if to say, "This isn't for me." That child would remain stuck for life, physically growing, but still sitting on the floor. The rising of the righteous is achieved through their repeated falls. Therefore, a person must not fear failure. The main thing is knowing the right path and doing everything possible to walk it. We weren't born angels, and even the greatest of Israel have had their struggles. In that letter by Rabbi Yitzhak Hutner, he writes something that others might not dare to say. He writes, "Everyone praises and exalts the Hafetz Hayim for his meticulous observance of guarding his speech. Indeed, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan of Radin, author of the Mishnah Berurah, also wrote the book Hafetz Hayim on the laws of Lashon Hara, slander and gossip. He is considered the epitome of guarding one's speech. There are extraordinary stories about his caution in avoiding Lashon Hara. Thanks to his example, many people today are mindful of their words, refraining from speaking Lashon Hara unless it is for a constructive purpose, which in that case is not considered Lashon Hara, but a mitzvah. For example, it is a mitzvah to warn someone not to marry a deceitful person who pretends to be something they are not, or to alert someone about a fraudster planning to deceive them in business. Such speech is not Lashon Hara. It's a mitzvah of returning lost property, Hashavat Aveda. However, speaking negatively without any constructive purpose, even if it's true, is forbidden. The Shafetz Chaim wrote an entire book on this topic. Rabbi Hutner writes, "Everyone exalts the Shafetz Chaim for how perfect he was in guarding his speech. But does anyone know how many times he failed in this area before he became the Shafetz Chaim? Was he born perfect? It's a mistake to focus solely on the greatness of our sages at their final station without discussing the challenges they faced along the way. Whenever people talk about great sages like Rabbi Ovadia Yosef or Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, the stories usually focus on their behavior at the age of 70 or 80, how they acted, their selflessness, their kindness to others. But were they born that way? What about the difficulties they faced in their youth, at 14, 17, or 20 years old? These struggles are rarely discussed. Rabbi Hutner says it's a mistake to immediately focus on their greatness. without mentioning the hard paths they traverse to get there. We should take this lesson for ourselves, especially young people. You're not expected to be Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky at the age of 25, but you are expected to strive to be what he was at 25. If he could conduct himself as he did at that age, so can you. Let's move to the next verse, which follows this one. Hand to hand, evil will not go unpunished, but the offspring of the righteous will be delivered. King Solomon says, a person who is stubborn and unwilling to admit their mistakes or adapt will face the consequences of hand to hand. What does this mean? It means that God operates with the principle of measure for measure. A person who insists on quarreling with everyone because of their ego should not think that God will overlook it. If you harm others, life will not simply go on smoothly for you. Solomon warns, know that God deals with people measure for measure. The Talmud teaches, whoever forgives others, their sins are forgiven. This doesn't mean letting others trample you, but if someone wronged you or offended you, and you choose to forgive and avoid escalating conflict, this is considered ma'avir al midotav. Letting go of one's strictness, whether it's in maintaining peace at home, at work, or among friends, if you choose to avoid quarrels and remain silent, even when you have something to say, God forgives your sins in return. Conversely, a person who insists on their stubbornness, creating disputes and arguments, will find that God deals with them similarly. This is the meaning of hand to hand, like one hand repaying another. Evil will not go unpunished. What does evil will not go unpunished mean? The Vilna Gaon explains that this verse has two interpretations. First, the word evil refers to the person. It means that an evil person will not be cleansed of their wrongdoing. Second, it means the person will not be cleansed from experiencing evil themselves. The verse continues, but the offspring of the righteous will be delivered. A person who walks in righteousness, doing what is right and just, benefits not only themselves, but also their children. There are sacrifices a person may not be willing to make for themselves, but they would do anything for their children. Solomon says, know that when you forgive and let go, your children will benefit. They will be delivered from troubles and punishment, for God remembers the kindness of parents. As we say in the prayer, how do we begin the Amidah? The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Why do we mention them? He remembers the kindness of the forefathers and brings redemption to their descendants for his name's sake, with love. It's like a king who had a general willing to die for him in battle. If someone tried to assassinate the king, this general would leap to take the bullet for him. In the end, the general survives, but his willingness to sacrifice himself for the king leaves an everlasting impression. One day, after the general has passed away, a young man comes before the king with a request. The king is unwilling to grant it. For example, the man asks for 10 years of tax exemption, and the king refuses. But before leaving, the young man says, you know, my grandfather was that general. The king responds, why didn't you say so earlier? Come back. Everything is forgiven. I'll grant your request. What changed? The king remembers the kindness the general showed and extends it to his descendants. This is how God deals with us. When a person acts with goodness and selflessness, their children benefit as well. That is why King Solomon says, the offspring of the righteous will be delivered. Not only will you be saved from troubles, but future generations will also reap the rewards of your good deeds. When it comes to the individual, there is always the principle of measure for measure. In the Star of David, the sages of Kabbalah explain there are many secrets. It's not just a random design, as some might think. In the book, The Code of the Letter, Zayin, we discussed many hints and secrets. We even proposed an entire lecture about the Star of David, covering the messages it contains about abundance, livelihood, blessings, relationships, and more. What is in the Star of David? It consists of an upright triangle and an inverted triangle, which together form the Star of David. This represents a deep secret about relationships. A man and a woman are both human beings, but to achieve harmony and complete unity, one must understand that men and women have different emotional needs. The upright triangle represents the woman, and the inverted triangle, resembling a funnel, represents the man. Each has unique needs, and recognizing and meeting them brings wholeness and unity. But related to our topic, if you remove the diagonal lines in the Star of David, you are left with two horizontal lines, one above and one below, representing heaven and earth. The Zohar teaches that every action we perform here on earth does not remain here. When you give charity, observe the Sabbath, or lay tefillin, each action immediately impacts the spiritual realms. The Zohar says that man is like a ladder standing on the earth, with its head reaching heaven. While we walk here on earth, the root of our soul exists in spiritual realms, Atzilut, Bria, Yeteira, and Asiya, spiritual worlds parallel to ours. Every action we take here creates an effect above. A mitzvah brings light and builds spiritual worlds, while a sin causes darkness and destruction. If a person repents, God repairs the damage. As God says, "Return, wayward children, I will heal your backslidings." Everything we do here influences the upper worlds, and the results eventually return to us according to our actions. This is the secret of measure for measure. You act here, it impacts above, and then the results manifest in this world. This is what the Zohar explains about Jacob's dream, where he saw a ladder standing on the ground and its head reaching heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it. The Zohar asks, if the angels are in heaven, shouldn't they first descend and then ascend? Why does the verse say, ascending and descending? The Zohar answers, when you perform a mitzvah, you create an angel. This angel is born in this world, ascends to advocate for you, builds spiritual worlds, and then brings blessings back down into this world as a reward for your good deeds. Our grandmothers used to tell us, do good, and good will come back to you. Do bad, and bad will come back to you. Where did they learn this? They understood the secrets of the universe. When you do good, it has an effect above, and the good returns to you. It's not wasted. This is hinted at in the Star of David, the connection between heaven and earth. Every action we take here sends energy upward, and then blessings flow downward into our physical world. This teaches us to be flexible in life and to cultivate a soft and kind nature. The sages said, a person should always be soft like a reed and not hard like a cedar. A cedar tree is strong, tall, and impressive, but when strong winds blow, it stands rigidly until it is uprooted and falls. In contrast, reeds bend in the wind, even a light breeze, and thus survive even the strongest storms. The sages advise us, be soft like a reed, not rigid like a cedar. A rigid, you're as tough as a cedar. It's true, you stand firm. But when a stormy wind comes, a serious challenge in life, you realize that your stubbornness has damaged your life. However, if you are flexible, willing to yield, forgiving, and at peace with yourself, people love you, your family loves you, and you gain in every way, both in this world and in the next. Let us conclude with a blessing for everyone here with us, that these words of Torah will be for the success of all, for the protection of the people of Israel and the soldiers of Israel, wherever they are. May we merit complete redemption. Amen and amen.